Hi, my name is Elise and I am a full-time cross-stitch designer. And I didn't always set out to be one, but somewhere along the way, choices were made and here I am. So I thought I would tell you a little bit about it. So I own 2 cross-stitch businesses. My business baby is Spruce Craft Co. that I created in 2015. We make cross-stitch kits and subscription boxes and digital patterns all based around my cross-stitch designs. And that has been going for 10 years now, which is very hard to believe. And my second business is Sew It All Australia. And that was a more established, older business that is probably about 25 years old now. And that sells cross-stitch fabric and accessories and cotton and thread. Our main product is our really beautiful printed Elise and Even weaves. We are like a one-stop cross-stitch shop. And I bought Sew It All from its previous owners, and they used to be my fabric supplier for the first 6 years of Spruce. And when they retired, they asked me if I wanted to buy it because I think I might have been the largest client. And I thought, why not? So now I run the 2 businesses side by side and they complement each other really well. So Sew It All was pretty, it wasn't very modern when I bought it. So it still had some really old school practices. So things like they were still handwriting their address labels and still taking credit cards manually. So when I bought it, I implemented a lot of the automations that we already had for Spruce. So we definitely got those automated printed labels going straight away. We switched website platforms to Shopify. So, credit cards weren't an issue. Everything just went through as normal. We took away the phone line option, which, we had a lot of older clients who they like the phone, but you know what? The internet has been around for many decades now, so it's time we all switched over. No more phone. It just took too long because people would call up and it was lovely. They wanted to have a conversation. That's really nice. But when you are trying to jam 40 hours of work into a 20-hour week, we don't have time. So we got rid of that option, just pushed everyone towards the website. It took a couple of years, but everyone has coped. We do the occasional call, phone order, and that's not a problem. So the website's become a lot more streamlined. Even physically, we changed some things. So all our fabric was on shelves and we changed it to these clothing racks. So that's, more sustainable on our bodies because fabric, when you put a lot of fabric together and you stack it on top of each other, it's very heavy. We also got rid of a lot of old-fashioned items that just have gone out of vogue. So things like tablecloths, people used to cross-stitch tablecloths, that took up so much space in our warehouse. Well, not our warehouse, it's, what do we call it? Our office. And they just weren't selling, so we got rid of them. And it means we have more space to introduce things like we started selling cotton and bring in a lot more modern accessories. I sort of started to change the business over time. Had it for 3 years now. I guess more to my tastes. So I'm a bit more of a modern cross-stitcher. And Sew It All had an older audience. Okay, I hope you don't mind. I'm going to do a little bit of work while I talk. I'm going to make up these little packs. These are the little cotton packs that go into our cross-stitch kits. So you're probably going to see a lot of the top of my head. But I've got to cut the cotton and then I thread however many strands is needed. This is my master sheet. It's got all my kits and what the cotton is needed, how many of each strand. I'd be lost without that sheet. Yeah, so pop it onto the thread cards and then later on I wrap them up and pop them into kits. So this is a fun little task because usually I can do this while I'm sitting in front of the TV. And any job that you can do while you're sitting in front of the TV and still feel productive is a-okay by me. So the Etsy years, all the way back at the start of 2015, which is when this journey started, I had just finished my coursework for my Masters of Speech Pathology program at Sydney Uni. And I remember there was this weird period of time, like a fair few months, where We had finished all our coursework and we were waiting to graduate, and we needed the paperwork from our graduation in order to be able to be registered with Speech Pathology Australia, which means that we could get a job. So we're kind of in limbo. And I was working as a disability support worker, but I had all this free time, which is very unusual when you're used to using all your free time to study. And I probably wasn't used to having so much free time. So I decided, as all creatives do, maybe it's time to start an Etsy shop. Not knowing anything about Etsy at all, I don't think I'd even shopped on it. So I basically had the idea of running a business before I had the idea of what I wanted to sell. And that is a problem. And I did try to sell, what were they, like cushion covers that I made? I would go and buy this fabric from Cabramatta in Sydney, which is an issue because I don't actually know how to sew. Like, I have a sewing machine and I could hem some pants, but I'm not a great sewist. I mean, like I couldn't sew a zipper to save my life, and I still can't. I don't know how to sew buttons on. I don't know what I was thinking, but I didn't sell any cushion covers, which is fair enough because I don't think they were very good. So the supply and demand worked really well there. But then I realized that my hobby has always been cross stitch. So ever since I was little, I think I started when I was about 9. So why not make my hobby my job? Famous last words. So at the time I was creating my own cross stitch patterns, and I was a poor student. So I was using the free version of this cross stitch software. And I would kind of cobble together a pattern. Like, this software, the free version wouldn't let you save it. So I had to sort of cobble it together, and it didn't matter because it was just me who was stitching these patterns. So they didn't have to be perfect. And I would use, I'd make patterns from photos that I found on the internet because, again, just for me, I didn't have to worry about copyright issues. Much simpler time. And I was doing that because I could never find anything I liked in stores. So the big box stores hardly had anything. There were a few clunky websites that would sell, huge designs, like big full coverage, and you would buy it and then they would post you the pattern. But again, that style it's not very modern, definitely designed for an older audience. Not that older people don't like modern patterns, but they were doing what they had always done, and they kind of hadn't, grown with the times, I guess. So I was forced to create my own patterns. And now that I look back on it, that was just a clear example of, finding a gap in the market and filling it with your own business, which I didn't set out to do that, but that's what happened. So once I decided that making digital cross-stitch patterns was the thing I was going to sell, I splurged $80 on the cross-stitch software. That was a lot of money at that time. And that program I still use today. Like, a few years ago, I updated to the lifetime access. But yeah, that is 10 years using the same program. That's pretty good value for money. So creating digital patterns and learning how to use Etsy and upload all my patterns, that became my new hobby. And it was, I just remember, a lot of work learning how to use Etsy. And, in those early days, you're just basically, it's very overwhelming. And you are just running on adrenaline because I guess you're just running on the hope of the future. And I remember my very first sale. So I was just leaving my apartment. So I was going through the door and I heard the ka-ching in my pocket from my phone, the Etsy ka-ching, and it was for $34 for 4 patterns. Immediately, my first reaction was I just felt sick. My stomach dropped because the first thing that popped in my head was like, oh no, someone has paid me money now. The stakes have suddenly got higher and they're going to want a refund. Like, why wouldn't they? Not a huge amount of confidence in my business skills back then, but they didn't want a refund, turns out. So over the next, a long time, months and months, years probably, I got the odd sale through Etsy every now and then. And it was just enough. You just need that one sale can hold so much power to give you motivation to just keep on going and just put all of that, hours and hours and hours of work into building. For me, it was the Etsy store, but you're building the beginning of your business. So it's almost like if we could harness the power of that first sale and bottle it, that's another business idea. So over the next few months, what I did. I spent all my time creating patterns, digital patterns, trying to make them better, uploading onto Etsy, doing all the little things that Etsy wants you to do to make your Etsy store good, learning how to use Instagram. I think we were still in the Valencia filter stage then and still taking pictures of our food. And no one really knew how to use Instagram for their business, or they were just learning how to do that. So there was all very, very steep learning curves everywhere you look. There were no, there's a lot of help now, a lot of tutorials on how to basically do every single step. But back then it was, you just learn as you go. And I did open up my Shopify store January 2016. So I just had Etsy for about 9 months. Then we opened the Shopify store and that got no action at all at the beginning. And I think probably my first sale was from someone who followed me on Instagram. So it all connects, doesn't it? And Etsy stayed my main source of sales for ages, like years. Remember, my first goal was to make $50 a week, and that would fund my craft supply habit. If I could earn $50, I'd have guilt-free trips to Spotlight, which is in Australia, that's our big box store, like Joann's. I think you've got Joann's in America, or Hobby Lobby. So yeah, Spotlight was the go-to destination for me. $50 a week would do it. And then once I hit that, I moved my goal to $375 a week. And it's a very specific number because that was our rent in our awful little Sydney dingy apartment. And that stayed, that goal, that $375 goal, stayed a goal for a very long time. Too long. You're very impatient by this stage. But yeah, so that's why I remember that goal so clearly, because it felt like I would never ever hit it. These ones are finished. See that? Oh, dropped one. These belong in my Aussie Faves kit. I'll show you. So this is the brochure and the kit design. Aussie favourites. You got a Vegemite, an iced Vovo, a Milo, and a Buffalo Bill. If you're not Australian, you probably will recognise the Vegemite. It's a bit of promotion there while we're at it. Okay, so now we are about 4.5 years in. It is the end of 2019. And some big changes had happened in that 4.5 years. I had a full-time speech pathology job and I'd left that. And we were trying for a baby. We ended up moving back from Sydney to Melbourne, to where our family and friends were. So I was working part-time as a speech pathologist. By the end of 2019, our son was 2. We'd bought a house. The end of my contract was coming up. I was on a 1-year contract. And I don't know how we decided this. So my husband and I discussed it and we said, I won't renew my contract and I'll put a bit of time in and focus on the business and see how far I can get it. So because by this stage I had started to introduce physical kits from my patterns, and now that I had a physical item, we could do craft markets and start selling them and getting the word out there a little bit more. And the craft markets had been really successful. It was just so hard to do when you're working, and especially once a kid comes along, it's almost impossible, because it's not just the time spent at markets, it's the preparing for it and the getting up at the crack of dawn and setting up and packing down, and then you're just so exhausted. But the ones that we had done sort of showed us that, there was definitely something here. So this was a really frustrating time in the business because I could see the potential, like it was right in front of me, but I just couldn't access it because I didn't have time. I just had no time to put into everything a business needs. So we decided I wouldn't renew my contract. I wasn't loving it anyway. I was very excited. Any business that sort of can start to scale, I think everyone has this issue. There's no one who tells you, yes, now is the right time to leave your job and it's risky. Wouldn't it be great if someone could come along and tell us the exact right time to do that? But we all kind of have to make that decision on our own. I was lucky that, my husband has a pretty stable government job. Our mortgage was manageable. Like we weren't overextended on the mortgage. So it didn't matter if my income was a lot lower, at least for a little while. And the other thing is, I was a speech pathologist and there's a lot of work around. So if it didn't work out after a few months, I could just go back and get another speech pathology job. Like, no problem. So I think that's how we looked at it. Like, it's just a few months just to test the waters and see how it goes. So I can't remember when the website started making more sales than Etsy. It might have been around this time. But yeah, eventually I just stopped putting all my effort into Etsy and moved it all over to Shopify and just left like the patterns on Etsy would just renew automatically. Didn't really bother about that. And so the sales on the website slowly built up more and more. And then Christmas 2019, we had an excellent, like really good sales, the most sales that we'd have in the history of the business. So it felt like everything was going in the right direction and that I'd made the right decision. Because I imagine that all these sales, extra sales I was getting was due to the fact that I could put that time into the business. It was very rewarding. I was seeing some rewards for my effort. So really good Christmas sales, everything going in the right direction. And then in February of 2020, someone mentioned that there was a flu going around in China. We didn't think too much of it. I went to a birthday party in March of 2020 and hardly anyone went, which was really strange. And everyone was still talking about this flu. And then basically what happened next week? COVID happened. Okay, so I live in Melbourne, Australia. And after China, we were the most locked down city in the world. So I have a very unique experience of what it's like to run a business during COVID. And boy, it was insane. So all of a sudden, people had all this free time and they realized that they didn't have any hobbies. And what was I selling? These hobbies in a bag, basically. So all the stock that I had made up on my website, it all just flew off the shelves. Like I've never seen anything like it. It was insane. Like I don't even really know how people found me, but they did and they cleared me out. So after all my made up stock had gone, I was just making up the kits as people were buying them. And at one point I was sitting on the floor surrounded by supplies and half-made kits and envelopes and stamps. And I counted up how many orders I had and how many hours it was going to take me to fulfill those orders to be caught up to right now. And it was going to take me 17 hours. And then during that 17 hours, I was probably going to get another 20 hours of work. So I did have an epiphany during that time. And that was that, I had always wanted to keep my website fully stocked because orders were sort of dripping in and I could just, if I didn't have something in stock, I would just make it up for them, no problem. But when the orders are coming in non-stop, that is not sustainable. Like I am not a big box store, but I was expecting myself to be one. So that little epiphany was very good for my mental health because I turned off all my ads. I took everything, like all my listings off my website, and I basically said, right, when I catch up and when I make more stock, I will list that stock and then you can buy it. So basically kind of like a drop model. And that made things a lot more sustainable. Like I could keep doing that ongoing, and then every drop would sell out. But the issue was, this sounds like a great problem, and it really was, because all of a sudden overnight my business had gone from a little side hustle to just a fully fledged huge business, and I had lots of money coming in, kind of the dream. But the problem is that I couldn't get supplies. So one of our restrictions was that we could only drive within a 5-kilometer radius, and only some of us could drive. So I was allowed to stay open because I'm a manufacturer and I didn't have any face-to-face clients. So that's the bonus of being an online retailer. So at one point we needed a work permit. So I had to write my work permit, and then because I was my own boss, I had to sign my own permit, and that felt very surreal. So I was allowed to drive around, and I drove, to all the craft stores that I could within my 5 kilometers, which is not that many. But the problem is they couldn't get supplies in either because there were no ships coming in from China. So I had to get really scrappy and just use the supplies that I had. I had, little things like all my kits have if we use yellow, they have a specific color of yellow, and I use that for every kit. It just got to the point where I was like, anything that was remotely similar to a yellow, I would use it just to get by. And and I started creating kits that only used the colors that I had, like the cotton colors, like these. And I think at one point I ran out of hoops, so I had to start selling kits without hoops. So some people ask me, why do some of your kits have hoops and some don't? And it's because you need variety, because what happens if this happens again? Like I always just want to be prepared. So I was just buying supplies wherever I could get it. one big thing or a big problem we had is I couldn't get any black cotton. There was the great black cotton shortage of 2020. And even now I still have tons of black cotton cones left over because I put in so many orders, and then after the pandemic, all of the orders came in and I have heaps of black cotton, which is a really good problem to have. I'm not mad about it. Okay, so I was doing this drop model, just very, very busy for like 18 months straight. I had my sister, she was able to help out, just doing orders and making up kits, and I had my husband doing customer service because there were lots of shipping, I wouldn't say complaints, but lots of shipping inquiries, like, where is my package? It's like, we have no clue, because postage was just like, if you sent something, you just hoped it got there. I think at one point, so we sent a package, can't remember if it was within Australia, I think it was, and we sent it off in March 2020 and it came back to us all battered in March 2021. So I don't know what kind of year-long journey that went on. Do you remember there were pictures in the news of the postage centres, the fulfilment centres, sort of just backlogged, just so many parcels waiting to be sent. So that was a very fun time. So in 2021, the second year of the pandemic, we had leased an office. We're literally just pushing us out of our tiny 3-bedroom house with all of our cross-stitch supplies. We got in a storage shed, getting help from my sister. And then we had maybe 7 or 8 lockdowns of various severity and lengths. So we were dealing with that. And 2021, I was pregnant with my second baby. And I had this call. I must have been in between lockdowns because I was in the shops, which seems strange in a time like that. And I got a call from my fabric supplier, from Sew It All, saying that they were selling and did I want to buy it? And I said, you know what? Why not? It was a great deal at a terrible time. Let's do it. The big problem as well is one of those lucky people that when I'm pregnant, I'm sick the whole way through. Like, there's no such thing as morning sickness. It's all day sickness. It goes right up until the last week of pregnancy. So I do not get a pregnancy glow. I get just sweat and I hate it. I love the newborn stage. I hate being pregnant. What a good way of taking my mind off this horrible experience is buy a business. So in between lockdowns, somehow magically we managed to time this so that Peter and Wayne, who owned Sew It All, drove down all the stock from New South Wales into our office in Melbourne. They set it all up. They stayed for a week and they taught us how to use the business, how to run it. Like, they basically set it up exactly the way that they had it, and we would just take over. We would just transfer all the bank accounts into our bank account and we would start running it. And then there was 100 little million things that we needed to do in between, but it wasn't simple. But when we look back on it, no one probably really knows what they're doing, because it's not every day that you buy a business or sell a business. And this was really risky because at this time in Australia, our borders were being shut at like the drop of a hat. So people if they were over state lines, they could get locked out of their entire state. The gods must have blessed us, because I think we got just the exact right weekend between lockdowns and they were able to get in and out perfectly fine. And now all of a sudden I had 2 businesses, and 6 weeks later I had my second baby. And I'm really lucky I had my sister working in the business, so she was able to cover all the orders. So everything went as smoothly as could be. When you're learning to use a new system, there's a lot of things that you want to change, but I couldn't do it when I had a newborn. You've kind of got to hold on to your horses until you've got some free time to be able to make all the changes that you want to make. So this whole time was just a massive blur. And I think it's just because the amount of things that happened during COVID and just the sheer volume of it, I felt like I grew, I had 10 years worth of growth in just that short amount of time. I'm very grateful for that, because it completely changed the business and it instantly became a full-time job for me. But like every retailer during the pandemic was hanging over our heads that this couldn't last. This was a bubble. The bubble was going to burst. We didn't know when, we didn't know what it was going to look like, but it would definitely happen. And that's pretty much how the COVID years ended. Okay, I didn't realize this was going to be such a long story. Right now I'm making the thread cards for my Christmas bauble kit. So we have a few little Christmas designs. You know, I'm so used to doing Instagram and TikTok that I don't usually do long videos like this. It's a lot. So this looming online bubble burst, did it happen? Yes, it did. But it wasn't like a big all of a sudden overnight drop. It was kind of like a slow leak. And it felt like you wouldn't get the same level of sales as you did the week before. And then this month wasn't as good as last month. And anything you tried, you know, it just wasn't working. You couldn't, no amount of emails that you could send or Instagram posts, nothing was getting you back to that level that you had. And that just went on and on and on. So that was like the slow decline of sales. So a few things happened at once. There was the war in Ukraine. Fuel prices just went through the roof. So shipping things or getting things flown in from overseas, it just got so expensive. Everyone's postage got expensive. And then there was this beef between Apple and Meta. And, you know, one wasn't allowing the other to use their data, something like that. Everyone's ads basically just tanked because we couldn't get the same reporting. Like we couldn't really see what was working and what wasn't. By the end of 2022, I would say the gravy train was pretty much over. And now all of us online businesses actually had to start putting in some work to get some sales, as it should be. That's how it normally is. But especially for all the businesses who started during the pandemic, this was like nothing they'd ever experienced. And really, since then, it's been tough for a lot of small businesses. The word of the pandemic was pivot, but it's the best word to use. We all had to pivot constantly. And because by now that I had tasted that full-time business life, I wanted to keep it. Like I didn't necessarily need to keep such high sales, especially if it was just going to only be me in the business. But I still wanted it to be my full-time job. So I had to figure out a way to keep sales at a level that I could keep doing this. And, you know, over the last few years, we've seen lots of businesses struggling and lots closing. And I think maybe I'm more hyper aware of it, or maybe it's my algorithm showing me all these businesses that are closing. So I had to do a lot of adjusting, you know, to the lower sales. The biggest thing we could do is slash our expenses. So what I found is when we were growing so quickly and we needed things like a commercial lease, and you just basically, you throw money at it to make your problems go away. And then when you don't have money to throw at things, you have to get creative. So I was just slashing expenses like there was no tomorrow. You just say you get a commercial lease. It's quicker to just sign up to one, you move in, you buy the furniture you need because you've got this money to do it. But coming down from that level is a lot harder. You can't just get out of a lease. You can't just move all your stuff somewhere. One, where are you going to put it all? Two, you know, usually you are locked into a lease. So we are lucky that our lease was only locked in for 2 years. We had negotiated that time down just in case, but I had nowhere to put all of our stuff. You know, we now had racks of fabric that couldn't just go in a storage shed, like it has to be protected. Even like our cotton, that has to be in a temperature controlled, dry area. So it took a long time, but we managed to really get a lot of our expenses down. One of the big things we had to do was we actually moved house. By this stage, we had 3 boys and we were in a tiny little house before. So we needed to move house anyway, but this was kind of like a little push that we needed. So right now I'm sitting in a converted garage and that is my office and it's plenty of space. Like this is, I use up every single little bit of it, but I can't see myself needing any more. That was a huge expense to be able to get rid of my lease. That brought all of our expenses down. I needed to keep staff for a while because I had tiny little babies, so I could only work part-time. And I had an amazing staff member, Beck, who for me up until just recently was excellent at prioritizing what needed to be done, and she made my life so much easier. But now I'm able to work full-time, so I do all the orders, I do all the ordering, the designing, everything. It's basically, I brought it right back to just a one-person business. And it kind of feels like, it feels fun. It feels like, how it was at the beginning, but I'm making more money. So that's, the best of both worlds. I've tried outsourcing different things over the years, like my Facebook ads. I had a Google ads agency. I think that's all I outsourced. But now, I've learned to do all of that myself. And I think you just, When you've got a small business, you need to know how to do it so that you can constantly be pulling on these levers. A big thing I've done as well is I've done a lot of education into cash flow. So I think I always had a theoretical knowledge of what cash flow is, but until you live it and until cash flow kicks your butt a little bit, you just can't possibly understand how important it is. Like, they call it the lifeblood of a business, and it is so true, because if you don't have cash flow, you don't have anything. So my main goal is to have a business that is not stressful. I'm not managing staff, and I don't have anyone relying on me for a wage except for myself. And I don't want to have to keep thinking about scaling and making enough sales just so that I could pay employee wages and rent. And I'm not looking for the whole scale at any cost, I think is the saying, isn't it? I just want a nice little simple business that pays my bills. I get to do my fun little crafts. I get to pack my orders and make videos and just potter around my little office, which is kind of like a hybrid craft cupboard and a storage shed. But I like it. But yeah, this is the season of my life right now. My kids are 7, 3, and 2. So still, I don't have a huge, I still need a lot of flexibility in my life. And the good thing is that sales have, in the last, I would say maybe year, even maybe 6 months, they have started to steady a bit. They've even maybe increased. So I think we're kind of getting over this post-pandemic bubble burst, correcting of the ship. I don't know what the right phrase is. Sort of starting to get back to normal times now. But a business is a constant work in progress. You don't ever just build a business and be like, right, this is the level I want to stay at forever. I'll just keep it like this. It's always going to be up and down, and you have to always make little tweaks just to keep it where you want it. And you have to keep evaluating if this is what you want as well. So always have a goal or a mission in mind. I think a lot of people might avoid doing that because it's frustrating that they're not at their goal yet. But if you don't have in your mind exactly what you want to achieve and where you want to get your business, how do you know where to go? Like, how do you know where to navigate exactly? And the closer you get to that goal, the more important it is to know where you want to be, because you just just change direction a little bit and you're somewhere completely different. So there we are. That is my whole entire business journey over the last 10 years. I think I'll have to do a follow-up video in another 10 years and see what has changed, because a lot can happen in 10 years. But hopefully the next 10 are not quite as turbulent as the last, although they were fun. So I plan on sharing more of my day-to-day of being a cross-stitch designer here in my little craft cupboard. If you wouldn't mind giving me a subscribe, I would be eternally grateful. And I've managed to get a little bit of work done. And now I've got some orders to do, some things to unpack, and I will see you in the next video.